Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Hamilton. Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton.
This is the story of a kid from a small town who had no money, no connections, and no privilege, yet somehow rose to become one of the most successful Formula One drivers of all time. Lewis Hamilton didn't grow up around racetracks in Monaco or rub shoulders with millionaires in the paddock. He came from Stevenage, a working class town on the outskirts of London. While most future champions were being groomed by powerful motorsport dynasties, Lewis was just a boy with a remote-controlled car, a dream, and a father willing to sacrifice everything. But even when he shattered records and stood on the top step of the podium, he still wasn't accepted by everyone. In a sport rooted in elitism, Hamilton was different, and not everyone liked that. His journey wasn't just about speed, it was about breaking barriers of class, of race, of expectation. And even when the world doubted him, he never stopped believing in himself. This is how Lewis Hamilton became more than a Formula One driver. He became a symbol of resilience, excellence, and what's possible when the world tells you no, and you do it anyway. Now, let's rewind the clock and start at the very beginning. Stevenage wasn't the kind of place where Formula One champions came from. Located in Hertfordshire, England, it's a modest town of council estates, concrete housing blocks, and football pitches surrounded by chain-link fences. That's where Lewis Hamilton grew up. His early childhood wasn't filled with luxuries, it was filled with challenges. Lewis was born in 1985 to Anthony Hamilton and Carmen Le Ballestière. His parents separated when he was just 2 years old. He lived with his mother until the age of 12, then moved in with his father, stepmother, and half-brother Nicholas, who was born with cerebral palsy. But even amid the hardships, Anthony Hamilton saw something in his son, a spark. Lewis was obsessed with speed. He'd watch Formula One races on TV, glued to the screen as Ayrton Senna sliced through the rain-soaked tracks with precision and passion. One Christmas, Anthony bought Lewis a remote-controlled car. It was a simple gift, but for Lewis, it was the ignition point. He mastered the RC circuits, beating older kids and even adults. He had reflexes, instinct, and raw talent. That's when Anthony made a decision, one that would change both of their lives forever. He promised to support Lewis's racing dream. But there was one problem: they didn't have money. Karting wasn't just expensive, it was borderline impossible for working class families. So Anthony worked 4 jobs: IT contractor by day, dishwasher by night, anything to keep fuel in the cart and tyres on the wheels. But the costs kept rising and the competition was brutal. Most of the kids racing against Lewis had personal coaches, corporate sponsorships, and state-of-the-art equipment. Lewis had second-hand gear and grit. The only way to stand out was to win, and win he did. Lewis Hamilton entered the world of competitive karting at the age of 8. It didn't take long for people to notice him. He wasn't just fast, he was different. Aggressive on the track, calm off it, and shockingly mature for his age. He looked up to Senna and he drove like him too. Fearless, committed, always on the edge. By the time he was 10, he had won his first British karting championship. At the 1995 Autosport Awards, young Lewis approached a man named Ron Dennis, the boss of the McLaren Formula One team. Lewis, barely tall enough to reach his shoulder, looked him in the eye and said, "Hi, I'm Lewis Hamilton. I won the British Championship and one day I want to race for your team." Ron Dennis smiled and signed his autograph with a promise: "Call me in 9 years, we'll sort something out then." But Lewis didn't have 9 years. His family was drowning in costs. They were running out of money and time. Each race could be his last. In a moment that felt like fate, Ron Dennis called back. Not in 9 years, but just 3. McLaren signed Lewis to the young driver program when he was just 13. It was unheard of. No black driver had ever been signed to a Formula One development contract that young. He became the youngest ever to secure such a deal. McLaren covered his racing costs. Mercedes stepped in with support too. Suddenly, karting turned into Formula Renault, then Formula 3, then GP2, where Lewis blew everyone away with impossible overtakes, racecraft beyond his years, and an unshakable mindset. But while others saw a golden path forming, Lewis knew better. He wasn't walking through an open door, he was breaking it down. Every paddock glance, every raised eyebrow, every microaggression reminded him that he didn't look like the others. He wasn't born into it. He had to earn every inch. He wasn't just racing for trophies, he was racing for respect. And soon, the call would come. You're going to Formula One. In 2007, Lewis Hamilton entered Formula One as a rookie, but this wasn't your average rookie debut. He was joining McLaren, one of the most storied teams in F1, and his teammate wasn't just anybody. It was double world champion Fernando Alonso. No pressure, right? But from the moment the visor dropped in Melbourne, Hamilton was electric. He finished third in his very first Grand Prix, then second in his second race, then another second, and another. He was relentless, and after just 6 races, he won his first Formula One Grand Prix in Montreal. He was leading the World Championship by the summer, but that success came at a cost. Alonso, the reigning champion, didn't expect to be challenged, let alone beaten by a rookie. Tensions boiled within the team. In Hungary, the feud exploded. Alonso blocked Hamilton in the pit lane, Hamilton retaliated, McLaren imploded. The 2007 season turned into a civil war. In the final race, Hamilton still had a chance to win the championship, but a gearbox glitch and a bold mistake ended his title hopes. He lost the championship by just 1 point. 1 point in his rookie year. It was heartbreaking, but it wasn't a failure. It was a warning shot to an entire Formula One grid. Lewis Hamilton wasn't just talented, he was ready, and the very next year, he proved it. 2008 was redemption. Hamilton returned to McLaren with one mission: finish what he started. And this time, he didn't care who stood in his way. He won in Australia, he won in Monaco, he won in Silverstone, lapping almost the entire field in the rain. It was pure dominance. But Formula One is rarely simple. The season went back and forth. Dramatic penalties, strategy errors, and rivals like Felipe Massa keeping the fight alive. The championship came down to the final race in Brazil. Massa crossed the line first, and for 38 seconds, Brazil thought he was world champion. But Hamilton, in the final corner of the final lap, overtook Timo Glock, securing 5th place, just enough to win the title by 1 point. The crowd fell silent, the Hamilton camp erupted. He was world champion, at 23, the youngest in history at the time. The first black driver to ever win an F1 world title. The barriers were shattered, but the battles were far from over. Because after 2008, everything got harder. McLaren began to struggle. The car wasn't good enough, the politics worsened, the pressure mounted, and off track, Lewis was changing, embracing fame, fashion, music, the celebrity lifestyle. Critics pounce, he's distracted, he's lost focus, he's not the same Lewis. But what they didn't realise was that he never wanted to be just another driver. He wanted to be himself, fully, loudly, unapologetically. By 2012, a bold decision was made, a decision that shocked the paddock, a decision that would change Formula One forever. At the end of 2012, Lewis Hamilton left McLaren. He walked away from the team that raised him, the team that gave him his F1 shot, to join Mercedes, and everyone thought he had lost his mind. Why Mercedes? They had won just 1 race in 3 years, their car was inconsistent, their future uncertain. People said he'd ruined his career, that he'd never win again, that he'd thrown away everything. But Hamilton knew something they didn't. Behind the scenes, Mercedes was preparing for a revolution. In 2014, Formula One would switch to new hybrid turbo engines, and Mercedes was building a monster. Hamilton joined forces with team boss Toto Wolff and reunited with childhood teammate Nico Rosberg. The stage was set. In 2013, there were flashes of brilliance, a win in Hungary, pole positions, and strategic misfires. But then came 2014, the turbo hybrid era, and Mercedes exploded. They were untouchable. Pole positions, dominant wins, front row lockouts. The only man who could stop Lewis Hamilton was Nico Rosberg. The battle turned personal. Hamilton and Rosberg, once friends, now fierce rivals. They clashed in Bahrain, collided in Spa, sabotaged each other's races. Their relationship collapsed. But amid the chaos, Hamilton rose. He won 11 races in 2014. He clinched the championship in Abu Dhabi. He was back on top, this time not as a kid with promise, but as a man in control. 2015 was even more dominant. Hamilton crushed the field. His third world title tied him with his idol Ayrton Senna. He became a global icon, racing in gold chains, showing up in red carpets, balancing music studios with the racetrack. But in 2016, the rivalry with Rosberg reached its breaking point. Rosberg came out swinging. He won the first 4 races. Hamilton responded with a furious comeback. They collided again in Spain and in Austria. Their garage was a war zone. In the final race in Abu Dhabi, Hamilton tried everything, even backing Rosberg into traffic. But it wasn't enough. Rosberg won the championship, then retired days later. It stunned the world. In 2017, Hamilton stood alone at Mercedes. No more rivalries, no more drama. Just him and history waiting to be made.
I stayed silent, fearing your response.
By the late 2010s, Lewis Hamilton had already carved out a space among the sport's elite, but it was clear he was chasing more than just records. Off the track, Hamilton was building something bigger, a movement. He used his voice to talk about things that Formula One had long ignored: climate change, diversity, racial inequality, mental health, things that made people uncomfortable, and things that desperately needed to be heard. When George Floyd was murdered in 2020, Hamilton didn't stay silent. He demanded F1 take a stand, and the paddock responded. He took a knee before races, wore t-shirts bearing powerful messages, and called out double standards across the sport. And he didn't stop there. Hamilton launched the Hamilton Commission, aimed at understanding why black people were so underrepresented in motorsport. He didn't just highlight the problem, he funded research, education initiatives, and programs to get more diverse talent into engineering, mechanics, and design. He also teamed up with Mercedes to create the Accelerate 25 program, targeting 25% of new hires at Mercedes to come from underrepresented backgrounds. But while activism was one lane, fashion was another. Hamilton became a global fashion icon. He collaborated with Tommy Hilfiger to launch collections that merged streetwear with high fashion. He appeared at Paris Fashion Week, at the Met Gala, on runways and red carpets. He wasn't dressing like a driver, he was dressing like an artist. Critics sneered, too flashy, too distracted, too Hollywood. But Hamilton had heard it all before. He knew who he was, and he wasn't shrinking to make others comfortable. And yet through it all, the fire to win never left him. In fact, it burned brighter than ever. Because there was still one thing left to do. One final milestone that would place him above all others. Win World Championship number 8. The 2021 Formula One season was one for the ages. Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, 2 titans on a collision course. Hamilton entered the year tied with Michael Schumacher on 7 world championships, the record. Verstappen was the rising star, hungry for his first, and from the very first race it was clear this wasn't going to be clean. It was going to be war. The season became a highlight reel of chaos. Overtakes, crashes, penalties, strategy, gambles. Neither man gave an inch. They clashed in Imola, touched in Silverstone, collided in Monza. Every race felt like a boxing round. The championship came down to one final showdown, Abu Dhabi. They were tied on points, equal footing, winner takes all. And for 57 laps, Hamilton was flawless. He led the race, managed the tyres, held off attacks. The 8th title was within reach. But then came the moment that stunned the world. A late crash triggered a safety car. Race director Michael Massey made an unprecedented and highly controversial decision to let only certain lap cars unlap themselves. Verstappen, on fresh tyres, restarted directly behind Hamilton with 1 lap to go. He overtook him. Hamilton lost the race, lost the title, lost history. The paddock erupted. Fans were outraged. Mercedes launched protests, but the result stood. Verstappen was champion. Hamilton didn't speak publicly for weeks. It was more than a loss. It felt like a robbery, and for the first time in his career, people wondered, would he come back? But he did. In 2022, Hamilton returned. Quiet, focused, determined. But the car let him down. The new regulations didn't favour Mercedes. Porpoising plagued their performance. Red Bull soared. Hamilton struggled, going winless for the first time in his career. 2023 offered more promise, but still no wins, still no 8th title. But through it all, he never stopped believing, never stopped pushing, never stopped showing up. Because champions aren't defined by trophies, they're defined by resilience. And in 2024, Hamilton shocked the world again. Not with a race win, but with a signature. He was leaving Mercedes and heading to Ferrari. The red overalls, the prancing horse, the weight of history. In early 2024, Lewis Hamilton announced he would be joining Scuderia Ferrari for the 2025 season. It was the bombshell of the year. After over a decade with Mercedes, Hamilton was starting fresh at 40. People wondered, why? Why walk away from the team that built your legacy? Why take the risk with Ferrari, a team legendary in name but troubled in results? But for Hamilton, it was simple. He wanted a new challenge, a final chapter, one last mountain to climb. Because if he could win with Ferrari, end their decades-long championship drought, it would be the ultimate storybook ending. But fairy tales don't come easy. Testing was tough. The car still lacked consistency. The media questioned the decision. Could Hamilton really deliver at his age? Was the dream over? But as always, Hamilton leaned in. He worked tirelessly with engineers, mentored young drivers, studied data long into the night. He brought belief back to Maranello, he brought hope to the Tifosi, and slowly, momentum began to shift. There were podiums, moments of brilliance, signs that the magic wasn't gone. But the 8th title, that still hung just out of reach. And maybe that was the point. Because Hamilton's legacy wasn't just about stats anymore. It was about the fight for change, the fight for inclusion, the fight to be seen, heard and remembered not just as a driver, but as a symbol of what's possible when talent meets heart. In the world of Formula One, numbers often define greatness: wins, poles, fastest laps, championships, and Lewis Hamilton has them all. But his legacy, it goes far beyond numbers. He didn't just rewrite the record books, he rewrote what a Formula One driver could be. A champion, yes, but also a fashion icon, an activist, a mentor, a disruptor, a global superstar. He broke barriers others were too afraid to approach and smashed ceilings others pretended didn't exist. From the karting tracks of Stevenage to the podiums of Monaco, Monza and Melbourne, Hamilton carried more than just a helmet, he carried the weight of history. He became the first and only black driver in Formula One. He made the sport listen when it wanted to stay silent. He turned pain into purpose, losses into lessons, and every setback into fuel. And through it all, he never stopped racing. Not just for points, not just for titles, but for something greater, for representation, for redemption, for legacy. Whether or not he ever wins that elusive 8th title, whether or not Ferrari becomes his final triumph, one truth is certain: Lewis Hamilton changed the game. And in doing so, he inspired millions to believe that no dream is too big, no voice too small, and no barrier too permanent. He didn't just drive in Formula One, he drove Formula One forward.